Hello and welcome to another GiantSlayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today our analysts will be listing the top 5 compositions for patch 11.10. This meta snapshot is based around what is doing well in the first week of the patch, so keep in mind that the meta may shift and change over time. We saw this last patch when the Vayne composition came out of nowhere and took over the meta. So far, no composition has done that quite yet in patch 11.10, though Skirmishers are definitely the flavor of the meta. With all that said, let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off our top 5, we have Karma INVOKER coming in at number 5. There's a bit more to this composition than just having Karma and a few Invokers. It more or less represents the idea of a capped level 9 board. By that, we mean the composition ends up using a lot of late game 5-cost champions like Teemo, Garen, and Heimerdinger. But the game plan to the build revolves hitting Karma during the mid game to stabilize long enough to begin piecing together your late game board. In general, Karma is not strong enough of a carry to win games. She doesn't do enough damage fast enough to beat Skirmishers, can't burn through Mordekaiser shields, and struggles against assassins. But Karma does provide the opportunity to play a level 9 board that will beat most other compositions in the ultra late game. Just getting to that point is difficult with how fast-paced the meta is during stage 3 and 4. There's several different boards you can end up playing with Karma, but the core composition revolves around Karma, Rel, a secondary Invoker, and Garen. The rest of the build can be filled in as you find pieces, with the end goal being a lot of 5-cost champions. Besides Karma as the main source of damage, the most essential champion that you must hit to prevent going in the bottom 4 is Garen. Garen is by far the best frontline champion for any AP heavy build due to his magic resistant shredding. This helps champions like Karma, VEL'KOZ, and Heimerdinger burn through the enemy frontline. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about Karma compositions, it's Karma and Garen together that's actually strong. Karma also needs additional damage late game from units like Teemo, Heimerdinger, and even VEL'KOZ can serve well enough. In addition to that, you need blue buff on Karma. Other items can be Jeweled Gauntlet, Infinity Edge, or Death Cap, but make sure you absolutely have blue buff. At the end of the day, Invoker compositions have a lot of late game potential. Just be wary of forcing them too hard, as they will struggle in stage 4 and 5 against most other meta comps. Let's move on to the number 4 composition, Assassins. Assassins are in an odd place right now in the meta. They can absolutely win lobbies, but they will struggle into a lot of top meta builds like Skirmishers and MORDEKAISER DRAVEN. But Assassins also wreck most other boards during stage 3, 4, and most of 5, which makes them an ideal build to play if you're aiming to consistently top 4. After a bug fix to Nocturne in 11.10, Assassins now have 3 potential carries that are all viable. Those 3 are Nocturne, LeBlanc, and Katarina. Of the 3, the most common and most successful is Katarina. She has a better stage 4 spike than the other 2, and thanks to her mobility, has a greater chance of carrying in the late game. Nocturne still suffers from the huge nerfs that Revenant received, but he's still capable of carrying if you find items for him. LeBlanc is better for winning during stage 3 and does better late game in lobbies that aren't running Caustic Quicksilver. So whichever flavor of assassin you play depends a lot on what items you have in the lobby you're in. Katarina is the easiest to run, so we'll focus on the variation using her as the carry. The core of the build is Katarina, 3 other assassins, and Coven. At level 8, you can run either Mystic Forgotten with Rise, 6 Assassin, or Revenant with Ivern and Volibear. Items are the key to doing well with Katarina, with the best in slot being Blue Buff, Shadow Guardian Angel, and Shadow Infinity Edge. This allows her to spam her ability while maximizing damage. Assassins also rely heavily on Morgana to do well, with her best in slot being Shadow Guardian Angel and Morellonomicon. Either version is fine. She will serve as the main frontliner, baiting the enemy melee units in and stunning them. This, alongside with having Guardian Angel, buys enough time for your assassins to devastate the enemy backline. Overall, assassins are about hitting the right timing in the lobby to do a ton of damage to other players, so they have an easier time squeezing into the top 4. Up next, we have VEL'KOZ coming in at number 3. There's a ton of VEL'KOZ compositions, so settling on just one was impossible, so we're just referring to this composition as VEL'KOZ. This is because for most of the builds using him, he's the main carry. Overall, VEL'KOZ is a fickle carry because he needs a lot of babysitting to do well. This means he needs good items, a good frontline, and a lot of effort has to go into positioning him every round. As for what composition to run with VEL'KOZ, well, it depends on what you're finding. At the moment in the mid game, the most popular variations of VEL'KOZ is Abomination with Spellweavers. It's a composition that relies on hitting early Abomination to win streak and spike at level 7 with 3 Abomination for Spellweaver. Brand can often be used as the main carry, at least until you hit a VEL'KOZ 2. This composition will fall off late game as the monstrosity gets outscaled, though there are variations that reroll to 3-star the Abomination champions. Another variation of VEL'KOZ is with Karma and Garen. Both Karma and VEL'KOZ can be interchangeable as the main carry, it just depends on which items you hit. But the goal is to have Karma act as the cleanup crew after VEL'KOZ casts his ability. Garen helps both champions with his MR Shred. The rest of the composition often leans towards redeemed champions like Syndra, Rel, and Lux, but really as long as you have a secondary INVOKER and a good frontline, you'll be fine. For items on VEL'KOZ, it's essential you have some type of mana item on him. Shojin is best in slot, with blue buff being an alright secondary option, though much worse than Shojin for VEL'KOZ. From there, you want a damage item, generally Jeweled Gauntlet, with the last slot going to whatever you're able to find. This can be Infinity Edge for the Glass Cannon VEL'KOZ, Gunblade for Sustain, or defensive item like Quicksilver. All in all, VEL'KOZ can win a lot of late game boards when positioned well, but he will struggle against compositions like MORDEKAISER with full items, Kale Knight boards, and Assassins. The key to winning those matchups is good scouting and positioning. Coming in as the number 2 composition, we have DRAVEN MORDEKAISER. This is another composition that is hard to define because there are so many builds that can run both DRAVEN and MORDEKAISER. But the core of those builds always revolves around the pair, as you rarely ever see one played without the other. The reason for this is that DRAVEN and MORDEKAISER synergize together really well. Not only because they're both Legionnaire, but MORDEKAISER provides a solid frontline for DRAVEN to sit behind and dish out damage. Both of them use different items, so you're usually able to secure at least 2 items for both. And lastly, they're easy to flex into a lot of compositions. The 3 most important traits are Legionnaire, Forgotten, and Dragon Slayer. Every composition running DRAVEN and MORDEKAISER is going to use some combination of those 3 traits in varying degrees. There's 6 Forgotten, 6 Legionnaire, 4 Dragon Slayer, 4 Legionnaire, and a mix of all 3 together. As for which variation to play, it mostly depends on what you're hitting on your roll down at level 7. If you hit mainly DRAVEN and a lot of Forgottens, play 6 Forgotten with MORDEKAISER providing Legionnaire. Maybe a 2-star MORDEKAISER early. In that case, you want at least 4 Legionnaire and probably Dragon Slayer. It's all relative to the specific game you're in. Just build around DRAVEN and MORDEKAISER and you'll likely end up with a strong comp. Items are important for DRAVEN and MORDEKAISER, though both of them are flexible in what you can use. DRAVEN loves sword items like Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster, and Deathblade. Rageblade or RFC are essential items for providing a boost in attack speed so that he can continually keep throwing his axes. MORDEKAISER can use a wide variety of items, with Warmogs, Quicksilver, and Jeweled Gauntlet being best in slot. Ideally, you want a caustic Quicksilver, as crowd control is the main enemy of a MORDEKAISER. There's plenty of other item variations you can run, just keep in mind DRAVEN wants to hit hard and fast, while MORDEKAISER does plenty of damage with his ability, so he mainly wants defensive or sustained focused items. As long as you have at least 2 items on both champions and can 2-star them, the chances of placing well when running DRAVEN and MORDEKAISER are quite high, especially since they can consistently win against Skirmishers. And since we just mentioned them, let's talk about the number 1 composition coming in patch 11.10, Skirmishers. Skirmishers are the current flavor of the meta, though for how long is hard to say, as the meta evolves rapidly once players find new builds to play. So far, Skirmishers have remained at the top in 11.10 after several of the Skirmishers received buffs in the patch. And with other builds receiving nerfs such as Vayne and Lissandra, Skirmishers have set up shop as the resident build to spam. There's a few reasons as to why Skirmishers are so good, aside from the buffs they received in the recent patch. The main reason is how low cost the champions are. This means you can get a Skirmisher build rolling during Stage 3 at level 6. Since they get such a power spike when 6 Skirmishers come online, it's becoming common for players to roll down on 3-2 or 3-3 just to hit 6 Skirmishers to stabilize with. The other reason for Skirmishers doing well is the champions themselves. Jax is a great mid-game carry, Kennen can be itemized to disrupt enemy backlines, Pantheon does well as a tank, and Lee Sin provides a lot of utility. Udyr and Nidalee do well in the early game as item holders for Jax. In the late game, you have the option of running Viego. But by far the most impactful champion is going to be Trundle. This is due to his ability, which steals the stats of whichever enemy he uses it on. What this means is if you have a Trundle against a beefy frontliner like say a Garen 2, when Trundle uses his ability, he's going to make Garen 2 super weak. This then lets Jax or other units easily kill off Garen. Trundle's ability works well against any target, but in particular, you want to make sure it's against high stat targets, with the juiciest being 3-star champions. As we mentioned, Skirmishers come online really early into the game, with the core of the build being Jax as the carry with 5 other Skirmishers. There's several variations you can play at level 8 of the build, with 3 Ironclad or 4 Dragon Slayer being the most common. Dragon Slayer is worth running if you can secure good items for MORDEKAISER, as he adds a lot of additional health and damage to the comp. The major downside to Skirmishers is that Jax needs specific items to do well. The best in slot items for Jax are Bloodthirster, Rune-Ins, and Caustic Quicksilver. Without those 3 items, you're going to struggle with Jax as the carry. Quicksilver isn't necessarily important depending on the lobby, but you really don't want your Jax getting permanently CC'd. Overall, Skirmishers are the best current composition because of how easy they are to play during stages 3 and 4. It's not the best late game comp, but you will consistently place in the top 4 as long as you're hitting the units early enough in the game, making them an ideal composition to run for climbing ranked. And that's going to be it for our top 5 compositions of patch 11.10. But before we go, we've got a few honorable mentions to briefly talk about. There's a lot of potential builds in the meta that have varying degrees of success. Yasuo Nightbringer is one of them, as it's a build that, when you hit, can potentially win you the game. But you need the right items on Yasuo and have to hit early enough for the build to do well. The composition has a lot of potential in the meta, it's just not consistent enough at the moment to be in the top 5. Next, we have Draconic. Draconic is really strong if you can find 3 Draconic during stage 2. Draconic after stage 2 is much weaker and is usually not worth running. But if you can high roll the units in stage 2, this composition easily gets you to level 8 or 9 to play a capped late game board revolving around Heimerdinger as the carry. And lastly, we have Kayle Knights. This board uses the stalling potential of Knights, Ironclad, and Taric healing to allow Kayle time to power up. It's possibly the best late game composition in the meta, but it's incredibly difficult to get online as you have to find Kayle. It's really strong, but far too inconsistent to be in the top 5. And that's all for today's video, folks. Skirmishers are certainly dominating a lot of the meta, but unlike last patch with Vayne, they aren't shutting down other compositions completely. There's plenty of viable builds to play depending on what you hit and what your personal playstyle is. Let us know in the comment section below which compositions you're having the most success with in your ranked climb. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for Giant Slayer TFT videos.